Welcome to episode 5 of the Sourdough Can Be Simple podcast. Thank you so much for joining me today. I'm going to go a little beyond last week's episode. We talked about using freshly milled flour in sourdough. A lot of you have jumped on the freshly milled flour bandwagon recently and ordered your grain meal. And you're just getting started, and it's so exciting. And I'm so grateful to be having a tiny little part of helping you along your way and getting used to using those fresh flours in your baking, in particular sourdough. Now today, I want to take some time and break down wheat berries for everyone. One question I get a lot is, which wheat berry do I need to use for this and that? And I wanted to put it in the podcast so that instead of just winging it, you can always come back to this, or maybe you can print off a transcript and have it on hand. I also have a blog post about this, and I will put it in the description box of this episode on YouTube. So let's talk about it. There are lots of ways that you can break down wheat berries, but the way I like to do it is to start with just breaking down the major different types. There's hard wheat and soft wheat. So those are your main two types of wheat berries. Each one of those has like sub varieties underneath, but the main thing to know is when you are baking bread that is going to rise, whether it be with yeast or sourdough, you want to use hard wheat. The difference between hard wheat and soft wheat is that hard wheat has less moisture and more protein, therefore it rises more and it has more strength. Soft wheat has more moisture and less protein, so it doesn't build gluten like hard wheat does. And so let's just take one at a time. I'm going to take the simplest one first so that we can spend quite a bit of time talking about all the different hard wheat varieties. So let's start with soft wheat. What would you use soft wheat for? Well, soft wheat is really good for things like biscuits, muffins, cakes. Think about like pastries, things that have a quick rise. Those are the types of breads that you would use with a soft wheat. You'll get a really moist product that is kind of airy and soft, crumbly. It's perfect in those applications. Now, you don't have to have soft wheat to make those recipes. I think that I always recommend people just get this one particular one and use it for everything at first, instead of getting all these different types of wheat berries that you have to try to figure out which one to use. That comes in time. But if you come across some soft wheat, it does have a place in the kitchen. It does have a use as far as making these quick breads and pastries and stuff. It really is better for that. When you're talking about freshly milled flours, the soft wheat is really good for those types of applications. I prefer to use it for things like biscuits and even all of my different muffin recipes, cupcakes, just anything that you're going for a soft, maybe flaky, airy, crumbly type of recipe, you're going to want to use soft wheat. Now, there's actually two varieties of soft wheat. There's soft white and soft red. I will be completely honest with you. I have never used soft red wheat. So I can't tell you exactly what the difference is, but I would say, in my opinion, if you are looking at it from the same perspective as hard red and hard white, what the difference is that soft white's going to be lighter and milder in flavor. Soft red is probably going to be a bit heavier and have more flavor. But now I have used a lot of soft white flour in my kitchen. It's a kind of a go-to for, those biscuits and pastries and different things like that. anything that I don't use yeast or sourdough in, I'm probably going to be reaching for soft white because it almost has a sweet flavor. To me, it just really works great in those applications, flavor-wise and texture-wise. And so that's soft wheat kind of in a nutshell. I don't use it a ton, but I do use it pretty regularly. I have made my sourdough biscuits with soft white wheat before, and so you can do that. But I prefer in a sourdough biscuit to use a hard wheat. And so let's move on to the big one, and that's hard wheat. There's so many different types of hard wheat, and I think it's important to really break them down. Now, for the beginner, I'm going to tell you just buy a bunch of hard white wheat, because hard white wheat, it can be used for everything. You can use it for your bread, for your biscuits, for your pie crust, for pasta, for muffins, for cakes, for cookies, anything like that. You're going to be able to use hard white wheat. It's very mild in flavor. It's light in texture. Especially if you're making like a sourdough artisan loaf. I'm making one right now, and I'm using hard white wheat because it's just very airy. It's light. It is whole wheat, obviously, but it's the lightest one. So if you go to your grocery store, some grocery stores, mine occasionally has it, they will have whole wheat flour, which is made from hard red wheat. And sometimes you will find white whole wheat, white whole wheat. That is from hard white wheat. And so that gives you an idea of the difference. If you've used both of those, that's what you'll be looking at with those, between the two, the hard red and the hard white. So let's talk about hard white. I want to spend some time talking about it. I love hard white wheat. I buy mine in 42-pound buckets of organic. I really can't stress enough, buy organic wheat berries that are free, glyphosate free. You don't want those pesticides on there because we're going for health. We want it to be as healthy as possible. I buy my wheat berries on breadbakers.com lately because it's just the cheapest option. I get the 6-pound bucket shipped to my door for just a little over $100, and that lasts for months and months. And so it really is the cheapest that I have found lately. A lot of times, Pleasant Hill Grains will have like sales, especially if you sign up for like their newsletter, and sometimes I can get a really similar price. And so it really just depends. But lately, the last 3 buckets of wheat berries that I've ordered have come from Bread Bakers, and they are very clean. They are not only in a big bucket, but they're also in a Mylar bag that has CO2 in there to make sure there are no bugs. There's no moisture. It's really packaged well, and so I highly recommend. Plus, they are a small business, and I like the thoughts of giving them my business because Sue has done an amazing job, tireless job of making sure that the word gets out about freshly milled flour, and I want to support her and I want to support her business, and so I make it a point to always buy my wheat berries from her lately. Like I said, the last 3 times I have bought from her, and I can't recommend them more. They do have small buckets available if you don't want to commit to 42 pounds of wheat berries. All right, so now let's talk about hard wheat. When we talk about using freshly milled flour in sourdough, you're talking about hard wheat. Hard wheat is what is used in any bread that uses yeast or sourdough. It rises beautifully, builds wonderful gluten, and it's exactly what you want when you are making those beautiful sourdough loaves of bread. I want to kind of talk about hard wheat in much the same way as I did soft wheat for just a minute, just to kind of break it down into those 2 main categories, hard white and hard red. For beginners, I always say to buy hard white wheat. As I've said before, it is mild in flavor. It is lighter in texture. And when you're just starting out, especially if you're trying to get your family on board, starting with hard white wheat is really the way to go. Because if you make your first loaf out of hard red wheat, there may be those in your family who say, this is like way too strong. So I would go with hard white. But let's talk about the differences really briefly, because I want to really dive into some subcategories and all these other different wheat berries. Hard white wheat it's a very light flour when you mill it. It's a great flour for even sifting if you want to use it for more delicate recipes like pastries and you don't have soft white wheat on hand. It's great for that. I never sift my flour, but it does sift well because I've done it a few times in the past, and it makes a really nice like biscuit. But it's just lighter in flavor too, milder, because when you go to the grocery store and you buy, whole wheat flour, that's hard red wheat. And I think we all can agree, it's a really strong flavor. It's a really, I like it. It appeals to me because I've been using freshly milled flour for years, and that's what I'm used to tasting. But I remember when I was a kid and whole wheat bread was the craze, and my mom bought some, and it was awful. It was the worst thing ever, because when you go from this fluffy white bread to this, what, most people call it cardboard bread, it's just like almost impossible to switch somebody. But I remember there was a point where a brand came out with white wheat. And so it was like a mixture, and that was way easier to kind of transition your family over to. And that's how I look at hard white and hard red. Start with hard white, because if you really want to transition your family, you don't want to hit them with something that they're like, oh my goodness, this is so strong, I don't like it. Make sure that you use what they're actually going to like. And so hard white wheat to me is the one. It is low moisture. It is high protein, makes beautiful loaves of bread. I make all of my artisan loaves with hard white wheat, even still. I mean, I've made them with hard red wheat, but I prefer the hard white wheat for artisan loaves, and that's just what I've landed on through the years, and so that's what I use. Now, if I'm going to make a sandwich loaf, I usually do a mixture of wheat berries. For that, I have a blog post about that. I'll try to remember to link it down in the comment or the description box on the YouTube channel. When using hard red wheat, now I use hard red wheat a lot in my kitchen. Now I keep 42-pound buckets of each, the hard white and the hard red. Hard red makes the best like sweets. So like muffins, brownies, cakes, anything like that, I will always reach for the hard red. I think that it has so much flavor, and I love to kind of balance that with a sweet. So if I'm making muffins, the honey that I add in kind of balances that strong earthy flavor of the hard red wheat. And it's just so high in fiber. It's so healthy. And when you add it to that more of a sweet treat, it's easier to get your family to eat the hard red wheat, and you can slowly transition them. My advice is, if you prefer you want to get to a point where you use hard red wheat, is start adding a little bit into your hard white wheat recipes, your bread recipes, and gradually transition into the hard red wheat. That's, how I did when I was using just hard red wheat. Now, if I'm doing yeast bread, like sandwich loaf, sometimes I do all hard red wheat, because yeast, rises so fast, and it's not heavy at all. It makes a really light and airy loaf. But mostly I do sourdough, and I just prefer the hard white wheat for that. And so that's your two big categories of conventional yeast Now, when we talk about conventional yeast, it's yeast that is the hybrid wheat. I think I said yeast. Wheat. The hybrid wheat. And it is, now it's not GMO until, as far as I know, there's no GMO wheat yet. I have heard that it's coming, though, in the United States, and I'm hoping against that. But it's something that we all need to keep our eyes on. I mean, if that's something that concerns you as it does me, we need to keep our eyes on making sure we're buying organic, non-GMO wheat. But like I said, I don't think there's GMO wheat in the United States. I may be wrong. I haven't really researched it probably in about 6 months to a year because I try to keep up on it. I did read an article, though, that was something that was coming. So keep your eye out on that. If that's something that concerns you, be sure to buy your organic wheat because generally organic means non-GMO. And so just educate yourself on good wheat sources. That's what I try to do. So what does hybrid wheat mean if it's not GMO? Hybrid wheat is from years of them like crossing wheats. When you talk about GMOs, that's done like in a laboratory, and they take parts of this and then they kind of develop this whole new wheat. And with a hybrid, it's not really that. It's that they cross-pollinated all these different types of wheats, and they came up with this one that grows shorter and makes more pods per stalk. And that's just something that they found because to feed the world, I guess they thought, we need to do better or make wheat that makes more wheat for the world. And so I use it, and I do I do buy organic, and I make sure that my sources are non-GMO because it will be here. Hopefully not, but I'll be surprised if it doesn't end up here like the corn and the soy. But that it's a lot less expensive to buy, the hybrid, the conventional wheat. And I think that one way we combat if there's any ill effects to conventional wheat is by long fermenting it in sourdough and breaking it down. I think that does help from what I've read. There's, lots of articles you can read about that if you want to go down the rabbit hole like I have with that. But there are heritage wheats that you can buy. We actually raised heritage turkey red here on our place, and it's a hard red wheat, and it is not an ancient wheat, which we will get into in just a minute. I want to spend a few minutes on heritage wheats. Heritage wheats are those before they really got into the hybridization. So they're still the tall, amber waves of grain, as you hear, the song says, and they don't have quite as many kernels per blade. And they've been through no hybridization at all. And so they are really flavorful. I think that the turkey red is one of the most flavorful wheats that I've ever had. I love it. It's a really hearty flour when you make bread with it. And I haven't used it probably in about 3 or 4 months, but I do like to have that on hand as well. There's a place called I'm trying to think of the name of it. I'm going to keep going, but I'm going to have that in my mind because I want to tell you what the name of it is. But there is a website. If I can't think of it, I'll put it in the description box. There's a website that sells the turkey red. That's where I've always bought it from. But, it's very flavorful, but much like ancient wheat, when you start getting into like specialty wheats, you're going to spend more. And if that's not an issue for you, then I would 100% say go with ancient wheats and heritage wheats. But for those of us who try to be very frugal and are concerned with filling our pantry, making sure that it's always stocked with these ingredients like wheat berries, the conventional wheat is it's the cheapest. You can get it organic. It's not GMO, and it's just what makes sense if you're on a budget. And so that's why I always tell people go with hard white wheat or hard red wheat. But the heritage grains are really good. For me, though, if I'm going to buy something other than a conventional wheat, I'm going to buy an ancient wheat most of the time. I do, like I said, I've kept turkey red on hand now and then, and we actually raised it year before last. We loved it. But last year we raised spelt, and we had a really good time raising an ancient wheat. So let's talk about ancient wheat. I know I didn't spend much time on heritage wheat, but I really have only used the turkey red, and I am more interested in ancient wheats than the heritage wheats. And so I've used them at length, and so I want to spend a good amount of time here talking about them. When you hear the word ancient wheat, it is what it's ancient. It's the oldest wheat varieties. There's einkorn, kamut, spelt, and emmer. There's also like little sub varieties. I think durum and I can't think of the other one, but those are the main top ones that you'll hear people talking about when they talk about ancient wheat. These are hard wheats. You can make bread, sourdough bread, with these wheats, but they're completely different in their gluten structure. So that means they don't really act like modern wheat. They don't build gluten the same way. They don't rise quite as much in the oven. They rise and they make, really, really good loaves of bread. So don't misunderstand me. But they don't rise quite as much as like a hard white wheat would. So let's talk about einkorn. Einkorn is like the most popular of the ancient wheats. And it is the oldest wheat that we know about. It's also one of the hardest ones to learn how to use in sourdough and yeasted breads. It's a very finicky flour to work with, but it is so delicious. And I am more apt to use my einkorn in things like muffins and pancakes and biscuits and things like that. But I recently did develop a recipe for einkorn whole grain, freshly milled einkorn artisan sourdough bread that turns out amazing, and I will link that in the description box. But it is so good. Now, if you are not on YouTube and you're listening to this, all of these posts and recipes are over on my blog, therosehomestead.com. Just head over there and you can find them in the search box. It makes a really nice loaf of bread. It's a heavier wheat, and it's very strong in flavor. So keep that in mind when you're making it for family that maybe not be used to it. I think einkorn is amazing. I try to keep it on hand. I don't use it all the time. It's pretty expensive, I'm not going to lie, but it is really, really good. And so I try to buy like 5-pound bags of it from ancientgrains.com or einkorn.com. And it is, it's a really popular wheat berry. And I think that if you try it, you'll like it. Try it with the easy stuff first and find out the flavor. So kamut is one of my very favorite wheat berries of all. It makes a buttery yellow flour that is really good for things like pancakes and muffins and cakes. I love using it in like cake recipes. I do make bread with it. I also have a whole grain kamut loaf recipe on my blog, and it is absolutely delicious. And the flour is quite easy to work with. I don't think it's quite as hard to work with as einkorn. And so I will gravitate towards kamut a lot of the times. I order that from the Food Nanny or from, I can't think of the name of it. I'll try to remember it. There's a website where you can buy different wheat berries, and I cannot think of the name of it because I haven't ordered it in a while, but I'll try to remember and link it. And then you've got spelt, my favorite. It is just so good, and it's the easiest to work with. Spelt is the easiest to make bread with, I think. Now, this is just my opinion. It rises pretty well, and it develops gluten much like conventional wheat. Not like 100% like it, but so similar that you can easily transition from hard white wheat to spelt. And it's a milder, nutty flavor. And I think that it's really top of the list for me when it comes to ancient wheat. It was easy to grow. If you want to grow a patch, it was really easy to grow. You can actually just sow the spelt berries in October, and then you will harvest it in June or early July, and you have your own wheat. It's really amazing too, the flavor when you grow it yourself. We don't grow enough, obviously, for a year or anything. We don't have room for that, but we grow enough for like a few months, and it is the best few months when we have our own wheat berries. And I remembered the name. The website where you can buy like these ancient wheat berries is breadtopia.com. So head over there because they have a lot of different wheat berries. And the last one is emmer, and I've never used it, but I have watched a lot of videos of people using emmer, and it seems to be almost exactly the same as einkorn. Quite difficult to work with until you get used to it, and probably best suited for things like muffins and cakes and pancakes and things like that until you get really used to working with it. Well, I have talked a lot longer than usual on this one, but it was such a fun topic to dive into with you all. I hope that I have explained all the different wheat berries to you, their different uses. And if you have any questions, be sure and let me know. Leave me a comment. And so I'm so excited for you all who have decided to take the plunge and get into freshly milled flour and sourdough. And I want to just be there with you every step of the way and make sure you're successful, because it is so worth it. And I want to be available. So if you have questions, there's many ways to get up with me. You can leave a comment on this video. You can send me a Facebook message. You can don't go to The Rose Homestead. That Facebook page was hacked. I hate Facebook. I'm just going to tell you. Facebook gets hacked all the time. But go to Rose Homestead on Facebook, and you can send me a message there. Instagram, _Rose_Homestead, and you can send me a message there. You can also send me a message through my website. I don't get those quite as quickly, but I do check those messages as well. All right. Well, that's all I have for you all today. I hope that you all enjoyed our little chat about wheat berries and which ones are best for what. And stay tuned for next week, and we will talk with you really soon.